So when it comes to Michael McDonagh's story, I'd say the moral of it is if you've been on the dole since you're 18 years old and have never had a job, don't buy yourself a €44,000 Hilux Toyota truck.
Well, I think the key here is not so much the 40,000, it's the fact it was a standout vehicle as it was described in an affidavit in the High Court.
Yeah.
I think the price he actually paid was a bit higher because it would have been, a vehicle traded in as well, but that was the cash amount.
Right.
Again, that was what was mentioned, but this is a guy, I think he would have been well known in his hometown of Ennis in County Clare, and part of that would have been because of the amount of feud incidents he would have been involved in, and there would have been other close family relatives who would have been involved in different acts of violence over the years. And it's something that I think the Sunday World, more than anyone, have written about. A lot of these arson attacks, and there was one attack involving a chainsaw, which Michael McDonagh was charged with, and he was involved in that incident in which a chainsaw was used to intimidate people. And there's been shootings, there's been cars being rammed. There's been so many different kind of incidents over the years. Now they're not all Michael McDonagh's fault, but you often wonder what's driving this. And then when you see in this cab case against him that it's really down to drugs and it's a turf war, really.
Yeah, I mean these incidents are they're not windows being broken or very minor incidents. They're like this ongoing, really intense intimidation. Now, as you said, of course, Michael McDonagh is not responsible for every feud incident that's occurred, but we've seen a lot of people being forced to flee homes, forced to flee halting sites, a lot of violence, and much of it, I would imagine, as well, going unreported as well. A lot of, we only get to really focus on the more extreme ends, but it's been more or less ongoing and now, when I know there's complications to various sub-feuds within the feuds, but it's been going on for a decade. But over that decade, Michael McDonagh, I think he's in his early 30s, is he? Father of 7.
He's 34 now, father of 7.
Yeah, so within that time frame, while all of this is going on in Ennis, he's managing to amass a huge amount of money. And according to the guards in a case brought by the Criminal Assets Bureau, he has amassed most of that money as a result of the drugs trade in the local area.
Yeah, I mean, it came down to 168,560, which was lodged into a bank account. And the period they were going after, I think, was 2017 to 2019. So it kind of gives you an idea of, I suppose,
a snapshot, really.
Yeah, and in a sense, this would be the disposable income.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the money that wasn't getting used on a day-to-day basis, or paying for holidays or for clothes or vehicles and that kind of thing. So it kind of does give you an idea. And it kind of, I suppose he went through great trouble to sort of find different ways to lodge this money into a bank account to make it look like it was legitimate money, and then had a change of mind and went to great lengths to take it all out again and bought 2 bank drafts.
Yeah.
Which are essentially, you go and you buy them, and it's like it's a draft from a bank. It's seen as good as cash to them for €50,000 each, and put them into his infant children's names, with the idea then that's obviously two small checks are much easier to hide than €100,000 in physical cash. You can possibly put them somewhere safer. And I guess what he didn't realize at the time is that there's to be a record of these checks, so they're actually frozen. So even though the Criminal Assets Bureau never got their hands on these checks, they cannot actually be cash. So they're no longer cash. They're just a useless piece of paper. But the state doesn't have it either.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. And they can't be cashed. I mean, if someone kind of gives them 50,000 on the basis that they're going to lodge it themselves into a bank account, they'll get a fright.
Right,
when a couple of days later you've been told, well, actually these bank drafts aren't.
So those bank drafts are still floating around in the ether or whatever. That uncashable, effectively.
Yeah, they're uncashable, hidden away presumably for a rainy day, or they're going to hope at some point that this has all been forgotten about, and there'll be some kind of attempt by somebody somewhere to cash it.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, this is a case that was settled, so we didn't hear all the details. It's quite possible that he's promised to hand them over or has handed them over. So we don't know that. None of that was mentioned in court.
Yeah. So what did the guard say about Michael McDonagh and how he had amassed this money?
Yeah, he was described as being part of a family-based organised crime gang of which he was the leader. His father, Bernie McDonagh Sr., would have been seen as the previous kind of head of this clan, and that Michael more or less took over and is seen as the directing and driving force of the organisation.
And that's the evidence given by the guards.
And again, this is the belief evidence that was given. And to give you an idea on the feuding, it's more than, I think it's something like 2011. I actually interviewed Bernard McDonagh Senior.
Yeah.
He had lost a finger in a machete attack, and his other son John, who was there. He was a teenager at the time. He picked up the lopped off digit and drove his father to the hospital, but they weren't able to reattach it. So I remember going down and speaking to him in Astline. It would have been a kind of a purpose-built kind of accommodation. There was about 5 or 6 different bungalows in it. And I remember at the time there was 1 or 2 of them. I think there was only 2 standing and 3 others had been burnt out. But since then, all those houses are gone.
Right.
Like they've all just been turned to rubble, burnt out. If anyone moved out for any amount of time, they were gone. And Bernard McDonagh Senior would have been part of a long ongoing court case when they moved on to county council owned lands, and it went to the High Court. I think it went as far as the Supreme Court over whether or not they were entitled to stay there. This was all kind of, it kind of made headlines at the time. A family, that weren't being housed by the county council. So what we know from this case, though, however, is that they were involved in a lot of criminal activity, and I suppose they were describing different parts of it. There was, say, raids on the area where they're living, the unofficial halting site, in 2019, and there was cocaine found. I think the warrant at the time was they were investigating a number of break-ins and thefts of tools and antiques in the region, and they were on the site looking for any evidence that they're involved in this, but instead found €7,000 worth of cocaine.
Yeah.
They kind of, so I mean, the criminality wasn't just drugs. There were other areas like the organised crime gang are believed to be involved in break-ins and burglaries and fencing stolen goods, that sort of thing as well.
So the Criminal Assets Bureau are describing those are the activities of that organised crime gang, and Michael McDonagh is seen as the head of it at this stage. Now, he was, there was a thing called layering, with term used by the Criminal Assets Bureau, who describing how he tried to kind of launder the money, I suppose, which is an interesting one. I haven't heard that. Obviously McDonagh, he's a regional player, and I think they say that he came to the attention of CAB due to an anonymous tip-off by members of the public, which the Criminal Assets Bureau have really tried to do in recent times, sort of get a bit of local knowledge on the ground. Obviously the Kinahans are, on another scale, but they rely, I suppose, on more localized information. What is that layering like? Can you describe it?
Well, I suppose they got into him again because of the standout Toyota Hilux that he was knocking around the town in. Ennis, that's a lovely town. It's kind of quite a tourist destination as well. But I suppose to a lot of locals, he would have fairly stood out again as, I suppose, at what stage is this? 6-7 years ago. So he'd have been in his mid to late 20s and he's driving this standout vehicle, having been on the dole since he was 18.
Yeah.
And I suppose, and I kind of mentioned there about he went through a lot of trouble trying to get his money into different accounts, and then spent a lot of trouble trying to get it out. And he obviously copped on about the vehicle as well, having drawn too much attention, because after 18 months he sold it, I think at a considerable loss of 12 or 18,000 euros, something like that. And the money went into a bank account of his wife's friend. Right. And then when, they needed money as such, his wife would go to her friend and money would be withdrawn. And this is what's described as layering, that you put money through various individuals or various accounts and make it look like that it's not your money, that it's someone else's. But again, unless this person has a legitimate, origin of where they could have had this, whatever it was, 32,000 or 30,000 euro, how could they have got that into their account?
Yeah.
In the first place, it's going to be fairly obvious. Like, well, this is the day that Michael McDonagh sold the. This is when when he sold his vehicle for cash.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was bought in his wife's name, even though she had never had a driving license.
Yeah.
And hadn't been seen driving it. So, I mean, it was all kind of trying to put his assets and his money at arm's length, which is, I suppose, just putting another layer between you and the money. But it was on a very crude level. I suppose the more sophisticated version of it would be to set up your companies in Dubai and have, get your couriers to bring you money out there, and then you send it onto an offshore company in the Cayman Islands, and then you buy your property in London, and then you have your firm in Dublin, buy a share of that back, and that's how you layer, like at the Kinahan level.
No,
but like getting your
end up buying a Toyota Hilux at the end of it all.
No, but I suppose in a way it is like, it's the same concept. Getting your wife's friend to hold on to the money and hope that she won't come to a guard attention, and that you have this mysterious income.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, that'll probably work. In terms of the banking system, won't necessarily pick it up because there's some sort of justifications for the money moving around. But once you come to the attention of the guards, you really are going to struggle to explain this kind of movement of money, aren't you?
Yeah, like there's no real way out again, because it's a civil case, and it's on the kind of the burden of proof is on the respondent, on the person who's been accused of being a drug dealer and having all this money from the proceeds of crime. So it's up to them to prove, well, no, like this 168,000 I got was from, working, as a landscaper or working as a teacher or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to then go and show like who the people were you gave grinds to, or you have to go and show like, your clients that where you did their lawn or you cut down trees or whatever. And even if it's, well, I was doing it all cash, that's fair enough. But you still have to produce these people, and then not declaring your income, in a sense, is also a criminal offence. And that's often used, like, that someone said, yeah, well, look, I did have all this money, but it was just undeclared income. Like, that's still enough for the CAB to take it. It's still enough for a judge to find in favour of CAB and say, well, look, on the balance of probabilities, it's the proceeds of crime, because it's a crime not to declare your taxes as well.
Yeah, and of course you have to live through, as you said, through all of this. This is the excess money in a sense. Like, people are living on a day-to-day basis, and that has to be shown as well to the Criminal Assets Bureau. If exactly as you said, if you went on a holiday for 2 weeks to Mexico, you have to say where that money come from. You can't just, well, I mean, people have done it before. I got lucky on the horses, but it hasn't proved to be a good line of excuses.
No, it's not a reliable income stream either. I think if you're kind of relying on that. But I mean, there's not to stop people like, just driving to England where, a cousin or a friend has already booked tickets, like, for a cruise in the Caribbean, and off you go with a wad of cash. Yeah. So, I mean, it'd be difficult to track all that down. But I mean, it's another kind of layer, I suppose, of effort that you have to make to hide your money. Yeah. And not everyone is necessarily going to have those kind of contacts, No,
or the foresight to think ahead and not even put pictures up on Facebook when you're on your cruise, which of course have happened before.
We've seen that all right, yeah. And I mean, thankfully for us.
Thankfully for us. The more you do it, the better from the Sunday World's perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Eamon. Very interesting case again.
Thanks, Niall. Always a pleasure.
Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.